reference, there have been reports that Israel has been treating wounded Syrian rebel fighters in its hospitals on the border, including fighters from Nusra Front, which is, of course, the Al-Qaida proxy in Syria. Do those reports worry you that Israel's helping wounded Al-Qaida-aligned fighters?
As I said before, in a different context, it's always useful also to deal with your enemies in a humane way. And I think that when you have people who are wounded and you can deal with them in a humane way, the considerations as to whether to take them in are not simply whether it's politically useful or whether it's politically
So it's purely humanitarian, you say? So there's no tactical or political strategic...
I didn't say there's no tactical. I said the main consideration, the immediate consideration is humane.
But the tactical issues involved, I mean, you know better than me the phrase blowback. You don't think there's going to be blowback against Israel if you get into bed with a group like Nusra Front?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's going to be blowback.
Why?
Because I think that, unfortunately, the rules of the game in Syria are such that you can do anything that is not possible to be done anywhere else.
Yeah, I think people said that in Afghanistan too. Would you also treat Hezbollah fighters?
No. I would not treat...
Have you not just contradicted what you told me 60
I've
seconds
not
ago about humanely treating your enemies?
No. I think as far as Hezbollah fighters are concerned, with them we have a different account.
So let me be clear, you're happy to treat Al-Qaida fighters, but not Hezbollah fighters?
We have a different account with Hezbollah, a totally different account, because Hezbollah has carried out the type of actions against us which preclude us from going into what the Al-Qaida has done. Al-Qaida, to the best of my recollection, has up to now not attacked Israel.
How big a presence do jihadists, and especially those allied to Al-Qaida, play in the rebels who are opposing and fighting Assad in Syria?
The jihadi presence is big and getting bigger. And the longer the conflict goes on there, the bigger it will get.
Do you worry about the possibility, you lose Assad, who's somebody that's no friend of Israel, but on the other hand, you then get a situation where you have Al-Qaida factions running part of Syria?
We've long advocated for Bashar al-Assad's departure. If he goes now, we would view that as a very positive development. He is an ally of Iran. He's an ally of Hezbollah. We understand that if jihadists were to come in, it wouldn't be good, but it perhaps wouldn't be as bad as the
extraordinary moment here. I'm about 2 miles, 2 kilometres from the Syrian border in an old cemetery. And behind me, there are Israeli troops massing. There's a jeep, there's an ambulance, and over here on the far side, I don't know if you can see it, there's an armoured vehicle as well, because it's a dangerous operation. They're going to be rescuing 4 wounded Syrians, badly wounded Syrians, including fighters, from the border and bringing them into Israel for treatment. And also they're going to be taking some Syrians who've been treated and delivering them back over the border into Syria. This is quite a remarkable operation for the Israeli Defense Forces to carry out, considering the fact that they are officially at war with Syria.
The journey to the Syrian border is tense, but the soldiers find what they're looking for: an unconscious alleged rebel militant with serious gunshot wounds who's been dumped just across the border.
The Daily Mail published an exclusive footage covering an operation of Israeli commandos to rescue and provide medical aid to Al-Qaida terrorists operating in Syria. The very same Al-Qaida which was supposedly responsible for the 9/11 attacks in the United States and many others worldwide, and is now regarded by the White House as moderate freedom fighters, because they are helping them take down Bashar al-Assad, while the other counterfeit terrorist group fabricated by the joint Mossad-CIA MI6, ISIS, provides plausible deniability for their employers in Tel Aviv, Washington and London. Now the fact that the Israeli operation was allowed to be recorded on camera can only mean they just don't give any fucks anymore. And when the powers that be no longer bother hiding their evil deeds, the shitstorm is about to hit the fan big time.
Rania, what was your reaction to news that Israel bombed a Syrian military airport last night?
I mean, I was surprised by it, but at the same time, throughout the civil war in Syria, Israel has repeatedly, at times, bombed Syrian military installations. Not once has it ever bombed the Al-Qaida groups that are in Syria, just the Syrian military. In fact, some people in the Syrian government often will refer to Israel as Al-Qaeda's air force. And it's also not surprising because, you know, Israel has this sort of tacit alliance with the Al-Qaeda branch in Syria, especially on the border with the Golan Heights, where they've been offering them aid, and they've admitted to this as well, also offering medical treatment to people fighting with al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria, and then sending them back into the battlefield. And so there is this tacit alliance, and actually recently, the Institute for Security Studies, which is this really important Israeli think tank, released this 300-page strategic paper for the Israeli government, and it was written by top military and political figures in Israel, and it had a section on Syria, and it basically said Israel's position is that the best thing for Israel is to remove the Syrian government in power now and replace it with some sort of Sunni sectarian state. I assume, you know, in the image of what you would call like Saudi Arabia, or any of the states actually support the rebels. And the reason for this is because Israel sees Hezbollah as one of the biggest threats in the region, and Hezbollah is fighting in Israel, and so they actually prefer to support Al-Qaeda over Hezbollah because it's Hezbollah, not Al-Qaeda, that presents a threat to Israel at the end of the day.
That's why people would probably be surprised with some of the groups that Israel's had a tacit alliance with in Syria.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, we're going to war with Iraq. Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. So I said, well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaida? He said, no. He says, there's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
let's say you're spending all day playing with friends and you always have problems and you're always having to logically work your way out of a problem. And somebody would say, you know, they basically say, that's not logical, get out of here. And, you know, and you would be practiced in working out your problems through dialogue, through reasoning, you know, and logic. Somebody would jump in and say, that reasoning's false. It's not logical.
Yes. And the people who consistently revert to force to settle disputes are known as criminals.
Yeah, because
they cannot communicate. You can. I've seen this. I've dealt with felons in programs, and you can see it's going to get violent. You know, any type of discussion becomes, first of all, it becomes personal. You know, like what you said really sucks, man. Instead of saying, well, let's just talk about let's just talk about the idea, and it goes from there to there's a threat of a fight right away. This is the problem with criminals. Okay, this is why they're criminals. Okay, yeah. This is why they end up in. I don't want to get into that, but I mean, civilized people have the ability to talk, and you say, well, I see your point. Let me modify my point, and we come to some type of agreement. That's what civilization is all about. That's what we need now. We don't need more war. Okay, we don't need more Israeli stooges in Congress. Congress is Israeli-occupied territory. That's the problem with the Congress of the United States of America. Okay, that's Pat Buchanan's term, but it's true. It is Israeli-occupied territory. It's never going to lead to peace when you've got these people like stooges like John McCain and Lindsey Graham agitating for war. They fly over to places like the Ukraine. McCain was there in January telling the Ukrainians to attack the Russians. He was in Libya cheering on those thugs that murdered Gaddafi, calling them freedom fighters.
Well, that's why people voted for Obama, because they didn't want to vote for McCain.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, give him credit. And give Obama credit. He did not listen to the Israel lobby and the Jews and Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been beating the bomb Iran drum for years now. It was people like Obama and Admiral Fallon and the unknown grown-ups there who basically resisted this. Why? Because the situation, it would be catastrophic. And I think this is what happened with Flynn. Oh my God, he's declared war on Iran. Get Trump on the phone. And you take him aside and say, look, Donald, I know you like this guy, but, okay, if you attack Iran takes out the Saudi oil facilities. Okay, they close the Persian Gulf. This means oil goes up to $200 a barrel. Who's going to benefit from that? The Russians, of course, because you've been waging oil war on the Russians for years now. You know, gas is under $2 a gallon. That's war against Russia, so this will be the opposite. Didn't you think about that? Well, I guess not. I guess Flynn is playing checkers here, and the rest of the world is playing chess. You know? And this is the problem here.